My name is Maribel Carter, and what happened last month taught me something I wish I had learned years earlier. Sometimes the strongest response to family manipulation isn't anger, it's strategy, quiet, precise, and impossible to undo. Do you know that feeling when your own parents call you selfish for protecting something that's rightfully yours, when they expect you to give up everything for the one child they've always favored? That's exactly what mine did when they found out I had inherited my grandmother's $780,000 house in Redwood Heights. They didn't ask. They didn't suggest. They showed up with a real estate agent, ready to force a sale, telling me if I didn't cooperate, I was no longer their daughter. But what they didn't know was that I had already sold the house 3 days earlier, and when they finally saw who was standing inside that house, my mother didn't just argue, she screamed. Before I tell you everything, consider subscribing only if stories about family pressure truly resonate with you. By being here, you're helping share something meaningful with others. I'm also curious, where are you listening from? I read every comment. This story includes some fictional elements, enhanced with AI for emotional and educational purposes. I hope you enjoy the experience. Growing up as the older daughter was supposed to mean something. Right, in most families. Maybe, but in mine. I learned very early that being first meant nothing if you weren't the favorite, and the favorite was always my younger sister, Lila Carter. While I was catching the bus to public school before sunrise, my parents were driving Lila across town to Silverwood Academy, a private school that cost more than most people made in a year. My mom used to smile and say, "Maribel is independent. She doesn't need as much." What she really meant was, I didn't deserve as much. I remember sitting at the kitchen table, holding out my report card filled with straight A's. My father barely looked at it before asking, "Did you see Lila's photography project? Her teacher says it might get featured in a regional exhibit." My achievements were expected. Hers were celebrated like miracles, dance classes, private tutors, art workshops in Europe. Lila got everything. When I asked to join the debate team, which required a small fee, my dad told me we needed to be careful with money that same week. He bought Lila a brand new laptop for her creative growth. But there was one person who saw everything clearly. My grandmother, Margaret Hale. While my parents were busy attending Lila's recitals and showcases, Grandma would quietly come into my room, sitting beside me like I actually mattered. "How's my smart girl doing?" she would ask. Listening, really listening when I talked about my coding projects or my part-time job at the bookstore. One night, when I was 16, after my parents skipped my academic ceremony to watch Lila perform on stage, I finally asked her the question that had been sitting in my chest for years. Why do they love her more? She pulled me close, her voice calm but firm. They don't love her more, Maribel. They love themselves more. And Lila reflects who they wish they were. You. You reflect who they actually are. Strong, grounded, real. And that makes them uncomfortable. I held on to those words like they were something solid in a life that never felt stable. Because while Lila drifted through college with everything paid for, changing majors whenever she got bored, I was working 3 jobs just to stay enrolled, building a life piece by piece with no safety net and no applause, while Lila was still trying to figure out who she wanted to be. Switching majors again and again, I stayed the course. I graduated with honors in accounting. Not exciting, not glamorous, but stable. Something I could build a life on. The day I received my CPA license, the only person sitting in the audience for me was my grandmother, Margaret Hale. My parents were in Cabo Verde, celebrating Lila's engagement to a man she had known for barely 3 months. An engagement that, unsurprisingly, didn't even last half a year. You'd think after years of being overlooked, I would have grown used to it, but some moments don't fade. They settle deep, like quiet reminders of exactly where you stand. My 25th birthday fell on a Saturday. I had mentioned it a few times, casually, hoping maybe we could have dinner together. Nothing big, just something normal. That morning, I woke up to silence. No messages, no calls, nothing. Around noon, I opened social media and saw my mom's post. Shopping day with my baby girl. So blessed. The picture showed her and Lila at a luxury mall. Arms full of bags, champagne glasses raised. It wasn't even Lila's birthday. When I graduated from college, my parents sent a short message. Congrats. That was it. When Lila finally graduated 2 years later, barely passing, they threw a party with over 50 guests and even hired a photographer. The invitation called it a celebration of their shining star. But my grandmother never missed a single moment of mine. Every milestone, no matter how small, she celebrated. She would show up at my apartment with homemade meals when I passed exams. She framed my first business card like it was a trophy. She even kept a folder of my college papers, proudly showing them off to her friends, always introducing me as her brilliant granddaughter. One afternoon, during one of our quiet Sunday lunches, she looked at me with that steady warmth in her eyes. "You're building something real, Maribel," she said softly. "Your parents may not see it, but I do. And one day, when I'm gone, you'll have more than just memories to hold on to." I thought she meant photos, maybe a piece of jewelry, something sentimental. I never imagined she meant the house on Willow Creek Drive, where I had spent every summer, every holiday, the place where I learned how to bake beside her, where she taught me how to care for a garden, and more importantly, how to believe that I mattered. It was a modest home. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a backyard that bloomed year-round. But to me, it was the only place that ever truly felt like home. When she passed away last year, I believed I had lost the only person who had ever chosen me. Then, a few days later, I received a call from attorney Daniel Reeves, asking me to come in for the reading of her will. And that was the moment everything began to change. Even sitting there in attorney Daniel Reeves's office, hearing my name read as the sole beneficiary, I knew this wasn't over. In my family, nothing that belonged to me had ever truly been mine. Every decision somehow became a family discussion, and those discussions always ended the same way, in Lila's favor. The real question wasn't whether they would come for the house. It was whether I would finally stop letting them take what was mine. Because the house wasn't just property. It was nearly $800,000 worth of prime real estate in one of Redwood Heights' most sought-after neighborhoods, just minutes from the tech corridor, close to the commuter rail, in an area where home values had quietly doubled over the last decade. But to me, it was something else entirely. It was the kitchen where Grandma Margaret taught me how to bake from scratch, laughing when I burned my first pie. It was the back porch where we sat for hours, reading in silence that never felt empty. It was the garden where she showed me that with patience and care, even the smallest things could grow into something beautiful. Every corner of that house held proof that I had once been seen, valued, loved, without conditions. At the time, I was living in a cramped studio apartment across the city, nearly an hour from work on a good day and much longer when traffic decided to turn everything into chaos. The inheritance meant stability, a real home, a place where I didn't have to worry about rent increases or unreliable roommates. More than that, it was only a few minutes away from the company where I had just secured a senior accountant position, the same company where, ironically, Lila had recently been promoted to marketing manager. She had been talking about it nonstop, how she was the youngest manager on the team, how the CEO himself had approved her promotion, how everything in her life was finally coming together. The house would change everything for me. It would cut my commute down to minutes, save me thousands each month, give me the space to build something bigger, maybe even take on private clients. This wasn't just a gift, it was my future. And somehow, I already knew they were going to try to take it. It only took a few days. Maribel, sweetheart, we need to talk about your grandmother's house. My mother's voice was softer than it had been in years, almost gentle. It's a lot of responsibility, she continued. Maybe too much for one person to handle. My father followed with concern that sounded almost convincing. If I hadn't spent my entire life waiting to hear it from him. Then came Lila, tearful, careful, perfectly positioned. I'm not saying you should give it to me, she said, her voice trembling just enough to sound sincere. But maybe we could share it. Or maybe you could sell it. And we split the money. It would just be fair. I mean, you already have a place to live. A place. That's what Lila called it. A cramped studio with peeling paint. A landlord who ignored maintenance requests. And plumbing that worked only when it felt like it. But sure, I already had a place. The pressure didn't stop there. It grew. And I knew exactly how this worked. In my family, no was never an answer. It was just the beginning of a negotiation I was expected to lose. The messages started at 6 in the morning. They didn't stop until midnight. Every day. For 2 weeks. Family means sharing. Maribel, don't be selfish. Your sister is starting a new life. She needs this more than you. Your grandmother would be so disappointed in you right now. That last one almost made me laugh. Grandma Margaret, who had very deliberately left that house to me and only me, would be disappointed. This was the same woman who once told me, with complete certainty, your parents would sell your shadow if Lila needed the money. Meanwhile, Lila's sadness evolved into something more dramatic. The soft tears turned into full emotional breakdowns. She would call me crying, talking about how she and her new boyfriend were finally ready to build a future together, but couldn't afford a home in this market. How unfair it was that I had been handed a house, while she had to struggle in the upscale apartment our parents were still paying for. Then came the family meeting. Suddenly, relatives I hadn't heard from in years started reaching out. Aunt Denise, Uncle Victor, cousins who had never once checked on me before, all of them repeating the same lines, almost word for word, as if they had been handed a script. Think about what's best for everyone. Lila has always been sensitive. You're the strong one. Don't let something like money come between family. By the time Thursday came, I was exhausted. That's when my father sent the message. Either you agree to sell the house and split the money, or you are no longer part of this family. Your choice. I stared at that message for a long time. Not welcome in the family, as if I had ever truly been. Then my phone buzzed again. A number I didn't recognize. Maribel. This is Ethan Cole. I heard through some professional contacts that you might be considering selling a property on Willow Creek Drive. I'd be very interested. Would you be open to talking Ethan Cole, my former study partner from college, the same Ethan who had gone on to build one of the fastest growing tech companies in the region, the same company where Lila worked, Ethan Cole, now the CEO of the very company where Lila had just been promoted. For a second, I just stared at the message. The universe really did have a strange sense of timing. I glanced back at my father's ultimatum, then at Ethan's text again, and for the first time in 2 weeks, I smiled. They wanted me to sell the house. Fine. They just never thought to ask who I might sell it to. I typed back. Hi, Ethan. Yes, I'm open to talking. But this needs to stay confidential for now. His reply came almost instantly. Understood. I can meet tonight. And Maribel. I remember how they treated you back in college. This time, you're in control. I read that line twice. Then I locked my phone. Something had just shifted. Now let me tell you about the day everything changed. The day my family thought they had me cornered, but instead walked straight into something they never saw coming. Attorney Daniel Reeves's conference room felt smaller than I remembered, packed with people who suddenly cared very deeply about family unity. My parents sat across from me, their posture rigid, their expressions sharp. Lila sat between them, already holding tissues, her eyes glossy like she had rehearsed this moment. Even my Aunt Denise had shown up, arms crossed, ready to support the performance. The polished wooden table reflected all of it, their certainty, their confidence. They came here expecting to win. Before we begin, my father said, not even waiting for Mr. Reeves to speak. We've brought our own real estate agent. He gestured toward a woman in a sharp red blazer. Already pulling out documents? Ms. Carter, she said briskly. I have multiple buyers ready. Cash offers. We can close quickly. That's a bit premature, Attorney Reeves said calmly, adjusting his glasses. Not at all. My mother cut in smoothly. We're here to resolve this as a family. The will has already been resolved, I said quietly. My father leaned forward. Wills can be contested. He replied. Undue influence. Questions about mental capacity. We've spoken to lawyers. Right on cue. Lila's composure broke. I can't believe you're making us go through this, she said, her voice trembling as tears slid down her face. After everything Mom and Dad have done for you. Everything. For a moment. I wasn't sure whether I wanted to laugh or cry. Instead, I did neither. I kept my expression calm, controlled. Exactly the way Grandma Margaret had taught me during our quiet chess games. Never let them see your next move. Maribel is being selfish, my mother announced to the room, her voice sharp with certainty. One daughter holding on to everything while the other is struggling. I'm not asking for everything, Lila said softly, dabbing her eyes. I just want things to be fair. Is that so wrong? The real estate agent? Ms. Carter slid a stack of documents across the table toward me. If we list the property today, I can have it sold within the week, she said confidently. The market is very active right now. Maribel hasn't agreed to sell. Attorney Reeves reminded them. She will, my father replied, his voice steady, cold. I knew that tone. It was the same one he used every time he was about to make something non-negotiable. Because if she doesn't, he continued, she's no longer part of this family. No holidays, no birthdays, no future contact. Nothing. The room fell quiet. Even Aunt Denise shifted uncomfortably in her seat. My mother reached over and squeezed Lila's hand as if she were the one being wronged. Your sister needs this, she said, looking directly at me. Her new role requires her to host clients. She needs a proper home. Not that apartment. The apartment you're paying for, I asked. That's temporary. My mother snapped. And it's none of your concern. Attorney Reeves cleared his throat, trying to bring the conversation back under control. Perhaps we should slow down and we should get her to sign. My father cut in. Today. Right now. I looked at each of them, the confidence in their faces, the certainty that this would end the way it always had. My phone vibrated softly in my pocket. I didn't need to check it to know who it was, but I did anyway. Contract signed. Ready when you are. Ethan. I slipped my phone back into my pocket and stood up. Actually, I said calmly, there's something you all need to know. Sit down. Maribel, my father said, his voice sharp, commanding. The same voice that used to make me freeze when I was a child. This time, I didn't move. I need to tell you something. The only thing you need to say is yes. My mother replied quickly. Yes. You'll sell? Yes. You'll share? Yes. You'll stop making this difficult. Lila sniffed, pressing a tissue to her eyes. I've already told Ryan we might start looking at houses soon, she said quietly. You're putting me in a really awkward position. Maribel. Ryan. This month's boyfriend. I wondered if he knew about the one before him, or the one before that. Your sister has worked incredibly hard to get where she is, Aunt Denise added, her tone firm, as if she had been part of Lila's journey all along. She deserves a house that reflects her new status. My father's voice followed immediately, colder than before. Unlike you, an accountant living in a studio. What exactly do you need with a 3-bedroom house? She'll probably just rent it out, Lila added, her tone shifting from fragile to sharp. Make money off Grandma's death. That's honestly disgusting. The irony of that almost made me lose my composure. Almost. Ms. Carter nudged the documents closer to me. The offer is very strong, she said. Above market value. You'd both walk away with enough for a solid down payment. Both, I repeated, looking directly at her. The house belongs to me. Don't get technical, my mother snapped. Family shares. Like you shared tuition, I asked quietly. Like you shared birthdays. Like you showed up to my graduations. My father let out a short, irritated breath. Here we go. Maribel and her grudges. You had Grandma all to yourself. Lila cut in. Every Sunday. Every holiday. You took all her attention. The least you can do is share what she left behind. Attorney Reeves shifted slightly in his chair. The will is very clear, he said carefully. Wills can be challenged. My father replied immediately. We've already spoken to lawyers. Undue influence is a real thing. An elderly woman being isolated and manipulated. That's not true, I said, my voice steady. Isn't it? My mother shot back. You were always there, filling her head with stories about how unfair we were, turning her against Lila. My phone vibrated again. I glanced down. On my way. 15 minutes. Ethan. I looked up at them. At the people who shared my last name but had never shared my reality, who demanded everything while offering nothing, who saw my grandmother's final gift as something they were entitled to take. You want the house? I said. The room stilled. Fine. Let's go see it. A ripple of confusion moved through them. My father narrowed his eyes. What are you doing? No games, I replied, slipping my phone back into my pocket. If we're going to decide this, we should do it at the house. You should see what you're so determined to take. It's not taking, my mother corrected, already reaching for her purse. It's family. Attorney Reeves stood up slowly. I should remind everyone that any decisions regarding the property we're done waiting. My father cut in. And just like that, the room emptied. The drive to Willow Creek Drive felt surreal. I drove alone, the silence in my car almost peaceful. Behind me, my parents, Lila, and Ms. Carter rode together, no doubt planning their final push. Attorney Reeves followed in his own car, his expression increasingly uneasy. My phone connected to the car speakers as it rang. I answered without hesitation. If you were in my position, would you have done the same thing, selling the house in secret and turning the situation around instead of giving in to family pressure? Would you stand your ground like that if you agree with what I did? Leave a 1 in the comments. I really want to know. Ethan, I said, keeping my voice calm as the call connected. You're sure about this? He asked. They actually want to see the house. They're about to get exactly what they asked for. I replied. The paperwork's done. He said. Filed with the county yesterday. It's official. I know. I glanced in the rearview mirror, watching my parents' car follow closely behind me. How's the car? I asked. Parked right out front. He said. You won't miss it. I'll see you in 10. Good, I said, ending the call. My phone immediately lit up again. Lila. Message after message. Just do the right thing. Don't embarrass yourself. Mom is really stressed because of you. I almost laughed. If my mother's blood pressure was rising, it wasn't because of me, it was because, for once, she wasn't getting what she wanted. We turned onto Willow Creek Drive, and there it was. The house. The familiar white exterior. The wraparound porch. The garden I had helped plant years ago. The place where my grandmother had taught me that family wasn't about blood. It was about who chose you. And sitting in the driveway, catching the afternoon light, was a white Tesla. Lila gasped loud enough for me to hear even before I stepped out of the car. That's... I pulled up to the curb and got out slowly, watching as realization began to creep across their faces. Lila had gone pale. My mother narrowed her eyes. Confused? My father was already irritated, though he clearly didn't understand why yet. Whose car is that? My mother demanded. Lila's voice dropped to a whisper. That's my CEO's car. Ethan Cole's car. Your CEO. My father turned sharply toward her. What would he be doing here? I walked toward the front door, keys in hand. Though I already knew they wouldn't work anymore. Why don't we find out? I said, before I could reach the door. It opened. I paused on the steps. There's something you should know about the house. I began. We know everything we need to know. My father interrupted. Brushing past me, it's a family asset being held hostage by... He stopped. Mid-sentence. Standing in the doorway was Ethan Cole. Relaxed. Confident. Effortlessly composed in a way that didn't need to prove anything to anyone, but somehow made everything around him feel smaller. Mr. Cole. Lila's voice trembled. What are you? Why are you here? Ethan gave her a polite, professional nod, then looked at me with a small, knowing smile. Maribel, he said. Perfect timing. My mother's voice cut through the silence, no longer as steady as before. Can someone explain what's going on, Ms. Carter stepped forward quickly, forcing a professional smile as she extended her hand. Mr. Cole, I'm Rebecca Carter. I understand you're interested in the property. I'm not interested. Ethan said smoothly. He didn't even reach for her hand. I'm the owner. The silence that followed was absolute, not just quiet, but stunned, disbelieving, the kind of silence that feels heavy in the air. My father was the first to recover. That's impossible, he snapped. This house belongs to Maribel. Belonged? Attorney Reeves corrected calmly, stepping forward for the first time since we arrived. Past tense. 3 days ago. I added quietly. The sale was finalized 3 days ago. Lila's expression shifted rapidly, like she couldn't decide which emotion to hold on to. Confusion, shock, anger, fear. You sold it, she whispered. You sold it to my boss. Technically, to his investment company. Ethan replied. Everything was handled properly. Attorney Reeves nodded. I reviewed all documentation. It's a clean transaction. Fair market value. Actually above market value. You can't do this, my mother shouted, her voice breaking. We're your family. You had no right. She had every right, Ethan said. his tone still controlled, but now edged with something firmer. It was her property. Her decision. But we had buyers, Ms. Carter insisted, her composure slipping. Cash offers. Ready to go. A little late for that, Ethan replied. My father's face darkened, turning a deep shade of red. This is manipulation, he said. You took advantage of her. This won't stand. We'll take legal action. Ethan let out a short laugh. An actual laugh. Mr. Carter, he said. I paid $800,000 for this property. $20,000 above asking. If anyone was taken advantage of, it certainly wasn't Maribel. He paused, then added calmly, I wanted this house. In this exact location? Why, Lila asked, her voice barely holding together. I could see it in her eyes, the realization forming, piece by piece. Ethan smiled slightly. We're opening a satellite office for our marketing division. He looked directly at her. Your division. Actually, Lila swayed slightly, like her balance had shifted under her. A satellite office, she repeated, almost inaudibly. Here, Ethan confirmed. We've been exploring ways to integrate more flexible, residential-style workspaces. This property is ideal. My father stepped forward, his anger now barely contained. You manipulated my daughter, he said. This is illegal. We'll sue. Which daughter? Ethan asked calmly, almost casually. Because Maribel came to me with a clean offer. I paid above market value. Everything is documented. You knew each other before. My mother accused, her voice rising again. This was planned. We were study partners in college, I said. Is it illegal to sell property to someone you know? When it's done to hurt your family? Yes, my father snapped. Attorney Reeves cleared his throat. Actually, no, that's not illegal at all. By now, people had started gathering on the sidewalk. Neighbors who had known my grandmother for years, watching, whispering, some of them openly recording. I spotted Mrs. Alvarez from next door holding up her phone, across the street. Mr. Thompson was watching with an expression that looked suspiciously like satisfaction. Maribel, please, Lila said, tears streaming down her face. This is my job, my future. Your job is safe. Ethan replied evenly. As long as you maintain professional standards. The message was clear. Lila understood immediately. Her crying stopped almost instantly. You did this on purpose, my mother said, stepping toward me. Attorney Reeves moved between us. I would strongly advise against that. He said, escalating this situation won't help you. What situation? My father demanded. We'll challenge the sale. Undue influence. Fraud. Whatever it takes. On what basis? Reeves asked. That Maribel sold her legally owned property to a willing buyer. She did it to hurt Lila. My mother insisted. I did it to protect my future. I said, just like you've always protected hers. Ms. Carter was already stepping back toward her car. I think I should leave, she muttered. This has clearly gone beyond a standard transaction. It's not a family discussion anymore, Ethan said. It's business. You haven't even heard the best part, I said, my voice steady in a way it had never been around them before. I have a 10-year lease agreement, below market rent. I looked directly at Lila. I'll be living here. Her face twisted in disbelief. And you, I continued, will be working here. A broken sound escaped her. You'll be here every day, I said quietly. In Grandma's house, your office, your meetings, your entire team, right here. This isn't real, she whispered, gripping my mother's arm. He can't force me to work here. That's harassment. Ethan remained composed. The marketing team requires a collaborative environment, he said. This location has been designated accordingly. Of course. You're free to request a transfer. The implication hung in the air. A step down. A loss of status. You planned this, my father said, pointing between Ethan and me. This is a setup. It's business. Ethan replied. Maribel needed a buyer. I needed a property. That's all. What about us? My mother shouted. What about Lila's future? What about it? I asked. For a moment. No one spoke. Then the words came out before I could stop them. For 32 years. Everything has been about Lila. Her school. Her hobbies. Her dreams. Her mistakes that you paid to fix. When was it ever about what I needed? You never needed anything. My father shot back. You were always strong, independent. I wasn't independent by choice, I said. My voice rising. I was independent because I had no other option. Every resource you had went to her. Around us. Phones were still recording. People whispering. Watching. Maybe we should continue this somewhere private, Attorney Reeves suggested. No. I said. They wanted to humiliate me publicly. They brought a realtor. They tried to force me to sign in front of everyone. I looked around. Let's keep it public. Ethan's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then back at us. The movers are here. A truck pulled up behind us. 2 men stepped out. Already unloading desks, chairs, and office equipment. No, Lila whispered. No. No. First team meeting is Monday, Ethan said calmly. 9 a.m. Sharp. I'm not working here, she said, her voice breaking. I refuse. That's your decision, he replied. HR can discuss your options if you choose not to comply. My mother turned to me, her face twisted with anger. You've destroyed your sister's life, she said. Are you satisfied now I didn't destroy anything? I answered. I sold my house. She still has her job. You still have your favorite child. I paused. The only difference is, I'm not yours to control anymore. My father stepped closer, his voice low and cold. You're done. You're not part of this family anymore. I met his eyes. Was I ever? Silence fell again. But this time it felt different. Lighter. Cleaner. Like something had finally broken and stayed broken. And that was only the beginning. The drive back to the house felt surreal. My grandmother's house. My former house. Ethan's house. Whatever it was now. It no longer belonged to them. Their car followed closely behind mine. I could almost picture what was happening inside it. My mother spiraling. My father already thinking about lawyers. Lila sitting in silence, trying to understand how everything had slipped out of her control. I parked and stepped out, walking toward the front door out of habit. I reached for my keys, then paused. They didn't work anymore. For a moment. I just stood there. It felt symbolic in a way I couldn't ignore. By the time the others got out of their car, more neighbors had gathered. This was a quiet street. Nothing ever happened here. Until now. Margaret would be proud of you. Maribel. The voice came from across the lawn, Mrs. Alvarez, who had lived 3 houses down for as long as I could remember. My mother froze. Proud, she snapped. Of this. Of her granddaughter betraying her own family, Mrs. Alvarez didn't hesitate. Of her granddaughter finally standing up for herself. She said, "We all knew how you treated her. Margaret told us everything." The color drained from my mother's face, then returned all at once. I hadn't known. I hadn't known that the neighbors knew. Ethan stood on the porch, surveying the property like it had always belonged to him. The movers continued unloading furniture behind him, desks, chairs, equipment that looked far more expensive than anything I had ever owned. Then I noticed something else. The Tesla wasn't alone anymore. 3 more cars had pulled up behind it. Sleek, expensive, familiar. I recognized the faces stepping out of them from company profiles and internal meetings. Ethan's leadership team. "What is this?" Lila demanded, her voice rising again as recognition set in. "Site planning." Ethan replied calmly. "We're mapping out the workspace." He glanced toward the front of the house. "Your office will be in the front room. The one with the bay window." I felt something tighten in my chest. That room. My grandmother's reading room. The place where she used to sit for hours with her tea. Watching the street. Waving to neighbors. Living in a quiet kind of peace. Now it would be Lila's workspace. A place where she would have to see me every single day. "That's..." she started, then stopped. There was nothing she could say that wouldn't expose the irony. Her department head, Vanessa Lynn, stepped out of one of the cars and walked over, smiling politely. "Leela, I didn't expect to see you here," she said, getting an early look at the new setup. Lila's mouth opened, then closed again. Yes. Just looking." Vanessa's attention shifted to me. "Maribel," she said, extending her hand. "Ethan mentioned you'd be staying here. It's wonderful that you get to remain in your grandmother's home." "You know her?" my mother asked sharply. "We've met before," Vanessa said. "Maribel did some consulting work for our finance team last year. Very impressive work." Actually, another piece of the truth. Revealed without warning. I had built something on my own, quietly, without their help, without their approval. My father looked at me, and this time, there was no confusion left in his expression, only realization. "You planned this," he said slowly. "All of it. You planned this to humiliate us." "No," I replied simply. "I've been planning to survive you." The words came out quieter than I expected, but they landed harder than anything I had ever said before. Ethan stepped forward, and something shifted in the air. Even the movers slowed down, sensing the tension. Conversations faded. The entire street seemed to hold its breath. "Mr. and Mrs. Carter," he began, his voice calm but carrying effortlessly. "Let me be absolutely clear about what has happened." He paused just long enough to make sure everyone was listening. 3 days ago, Maribel Carter sold me this property for $800,000. The transaction is complete, officially recorded, and irreversible. You took advantage of her. My father cut in. "I took advantage of an opportunity," Ethan replied smoothly. "Maribel needed a buyer who understood the value of this property to her. I needed a location for a strategic expansion. We both benefited." "And Lila," my mother's voice cracked. "What about our daughter?" Ethan looked at her for a moment. "Which one?" he asked. The silence that followed was sharp. "Because from what I've seen," he continued, "you only seem concerned about one of them." Lila stepped forward, her composure finally breaking again. "Mr. Cole, please," she said, her voice trembling. "This is my family. My sister. There has to be some way to fix this." "There already is," he said. "You'll report here on Monday for team meetings." He glanced briefly toward the house. "Maribel will be residing upstairs under the terms of our lease agreement. You will maintain professional boundaries. Any form of harassment toward our tenant will result in immediate termination." "Harassment," Lila repeated, stunned. "She's my sister. The same sister you tried to force out of her inheritance," Vanessa Lynn said calmly, stepping forward. It was clear she had been fully informed. "That ends now." Around us, the neighbors were fully engaged. I noticed Mr. Thompson standing near the sidewalk with a bowl of popcorn, Watching like this was the most entertaining thing he had seen in years. "This is extortion," my father said, his voice shaking with anger. Attorney Reeves finally stepped forward again. "No," he said. "This is the consequence of your actions. Something your family doesn't seem familiar with." "Daniel," my mother said sharply, "you're supposed to be neutral." "I am neutral," he replied. "I'm also honest." He turned slightly, addressing the situation with quiet authority. "Your mother, Margaret Hale, made her intentions very clear. She explicitly removed any possibility of family interference in this decision." He paused, then added, "She told me," and I quote, "They will try to take this from Maribel. Don't let them." Everything went still. I felt something in my chest tighten. "She said that?" I asked softly. He nodded. "She understood exactly what she was doing, and she understood what Maribel would be up against. That's why the will was written the way it was. No shared ownership, no overrides, no ambiguity." "She turned her against us," my mother said, her voice unsteady. "No." Mrs. Alvarez called out from the crowd. "Margaret saw you clearly." More neighbors murmured in agreement. "We all did," she continued. "The way you lifted Lila up while Maribel was always left behind. The birthday parties you threw for one daughter while acting like the other didn't exist." "That's private family business," my father snapped, his voice rising. "Not when you're shouting it across my property." Ethan replied calmly, "And just to be clear, you're currently trespassing. Unless Maribel invites you to stay, you should leave." Every eye turned to me. My parents, the neighbors, Ethan and his team, all waiting. Attorney Reeves stepped forward, opening his briefcase with quiet precision. "The sale is completely legal," he said, pulling out documents. "Here is the deed transfer filed with the county 3 days ago. Title search is clean. Purchase agreement signed and notarized. Everything is in order." He laid the documents out across the hood of his car like evidence in a courtroom. Maribel had full legal authority to sell. He continued, "No liens, no competing claims. Your threats to challenge the will have no standing. Your mother, Margaret Hale, was evaluated by 2 independent physicians before finalizing her will. Both confirmed she was fully competent." "You knew about this?" my father demanded. "I knew she was considering her options," Reeves replied. "It was never my responsibility to inform you, but we're family," my mother insisted. "That has no legal relevance here," he said evenly. "Maribel owes you nothing regarding this property. She never did." Ethan pulled out his phone. "I can also provide confirmation of the wire transfer," he added. $800,000. Cleared 3 days ago." My mother shook her head in disbelief. "This is disgusting. Using money to destroy your own family." "The only thing being destroyed," Ethan said, "is the assumption that you could control her forever." I watched Lila as everything finally began to sink in. Her boss owned the house. Her workplace would be here, the same place she had tried to take from me. And she would have to see me here every day, knowing I could have given everything up, but chose not to. "There's something else," I said, my voice steady. Everyone turned back to me. "The lease agreement includes a clause. I have the right of first refusal if the property is ever sold." What my father said sharply, "It means," Attorney Reeves explained, "that Maribel can purchase the property back at the original price whenever Mr. Cole decides to sell. She's not just a tenant. She has protected future ownership rights." My mother stared at me, struggling to process it. That's planning," she said. "Yes," I replied. "Long-term planning. Something I had learned on my own. Something they had never taught me. My grandmother used to say the smartest kind of revenge isn't emotional. I continued. It's written in contracts. Ethan smiled slightly. She sounds like she was a remarkable woman. She was, I said, looking directly at my parents. She saw something in me that you never did, that I wasn't weak just because I stayed quiet. I paused. I was paying attention, learning, waiting, for what Lila asked. Her voice barely steady now. For the moment you tried to take the one thing that was truly mine, I gestured toward the house, the documents, the people watching, and now, here we are. Lila stood there, staring at everything like it no longer made sense. So let me get this straight, she said slowly. I'm supposed to work here. My office is going to be in Grandma's reading room, and you're going to be living upstairs. Correct, Ethan said. His tone didn't change. And if you refuse, that's your decision. But refusing a reasonable work assignment would be considered insubordination. That's not reasonable, Lila protested, her voice shaking. This is punishment. This is business. Vanessa Lynn said calmly. The location was selected based on proximity and suitability for team collaboration. Your personal feelings about the property are not relevant. Not relevant, my mother cried out. My daughter has to work in a house she should have inherited. Should have, I asked. Looking at her, based on what? Being younger, being prettier, being the one you loved more. Based on need. My father snapped. She needs it more than you do. No, I said firmly. She wants it more. I held his gaze. There's a difference. I needed stability. I needed a home. I needed to stop living under your control. I gestured toward Lila. She wanted another upgrade, another thing you would hand to her without question. How dare you, my mother said, stepping toward me again. Ethan moved immediately, placing himself between us. You need to leave, he said, his voice calm but final. You are on private property. If you don't, I will contact the police. You wouldn't. My father challenged. Ethan didn't respond. He simply pulled out his phone. Yes, he said after a moment. I need assistance with trespassers at Willow Creek Drive. That was enough. We're leaving, my mother said quickly, grabbing my father's arm. But this isn't over. Actually, I said. It is. I looked at them one last time. The house is sold. The contracts are signed. Lila starts work here on Monday. And I'm going to live my life here. On my terms. My home. Your home. Lila let out a bitter laugh. You're just a tenant. A tenant with a 10-year lease, below market rent, and the right to buy it back. I replied, that's more ownership than you will ever have. A police car turned the corner at the end of the street. That seemed to push them the rest of the way. You chose strangers over your own family, my mother said. Her voice filled with accusation. No, I said quietly. I chose myself over people who never chose me. This is your fault, Lila whispered. Her voice filled with resentment. When this all falls apart. When you're alone. Remember you did this. I will, I said. Every morning I wake up in my grandmother's house. Every evening I walk through her garden. Every moment I live without having to beg for the smallest amount of respect. I will remember exactly why I chose this. They left soon after. My mother crying loudly enough for the neighbors to hear. My father muttering about lawsuits. Lila silent, her expression hollow. And just like that, it was over. Or at least, that part of it was. The aftermath came fast, within an hour. My mother had already posted online. Heartbroken. When money matters more than a mother's love, some daughters reveal their true nature. 15 minutes later, my Aunt Denise called me, Maribel. What actually happened, she asked. Your mother is saying you sold the house just to hurt them. I sold my house to someone who offered above market value. I said simply. The fact that he happens to be Lila's CEO is just timing. She laughed. A real laugh. Timing. That's incredible, she said. Your grandmother would be laughing right now. The family group chat exploded not long after. Messages flying back and forth, people taking sides, some threatening legal action they didn't understand, others pretending to be shocked by things they had always known. But the most unexpected part came from somewhere else. The neighborhood group chat. Mrs. Alvarez had added me, and the messages there were different. Finally. Someone stood up to them. Margaret always said Maribel was the strong one. About time someone proved her right. Did you see Robert's face? That was priceless. And after all these years talking about how successful Lila is, funny how no one's mentioning where her office is now. Messages like that kept coming in. By Monday morning, everything felt different. I woke up in my grandmother's bed. Sunlight coming through the same curtains I had known for years. I made coffee in her kitchen, using the same mug she always used, standing in a space that finally felt like it belonged to me. At 8:45, the first cars started arriving. By 8:58, Lila pulled up. She stayed inside her car for a full 5 minutes, probably trying to steady herself. When she finally stepped out, she looked up instinctively toward the house, toward my window. I raised my hand and waved. The expression on her face, it was something I would never forget. That morning, Vanessa Lynn led the meeting in what used to be my grandmother's reading room. I could hear fragments of it through the vents, phrases about collaborative environments, innovative workspace models, residential integration, corporate language for something much simpler. This was no longer her territory. At lunchtime, there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find Lila standing there, looking smaller than I had ever seen her. "Can we talk?" she asked. I stepped aside and let her in. She looked around the space I had created upstairs, my books neatly arranged, plants by the windows, small details that reflected a life I had built on my own. "This isn't fair," she said quietly. "What isn't?" I asked. "You living here. Me working downstairs. It's unbearable. It's the result of your choices," I said. "You tried to take what was mine. Now you have to face what that means." "I'm your sister," she said, her voice soft but strained. "Yes," I replied, "and that should have mattered before you tried to take everything from me." She didn't argue after that. She just turned and walked out. That evening, Ethan called. "How was the first day?" he asked. "Informative," I said. "For everyone involved." No regrets. I looked around the kitchen. The quiet, the familiarity, the sense of something finally being right. "Not one," I said. 3 months later, everything had settled into a strange kind of routine. Lila arrived every morning at exactly 9. Not early, never late. She parked in the designated area Ethan had assigned, gathered her things, and walked inside without ever looking up. The house had changed. Downstairs was all business now. Clean lines, screens, meetings, constant movement. Upstairs remained untouched. My grandmother's space. My space. Ethan mentioned during one of our monthly check-ins that my parents had reached out again. They offered to buy the property. He said, twice what I paid. And I asked. I declined. He replied, "Your father wasn't happy." That sounds about right. But the biggest change wasn't the house. It was Lila. Without my parents constantly supporting her, without money smoothing over every mistake, she was struggling. Her performance slipped. Her confidence faded. Vanessa mentioned it to me once when we crossed paths in the garden. "She's not used to this," she said. "Connections got her here. but they can't do the work for her. The family had fractured completely. Thanksgiving came and went without a word. Christmas, too. The only message I received was a short text from my mother. "You're missing Lila's engagement party." Another engagement. Another name. I didn't ask who this one was. Or maybe it was someone else entirely. I had stopped keeping track. What I gained was something far more valuable: peace. Mornings with coffee in my grandmother's garden, evenings curled up in her reading chair, surrounded by the quiet she used to say was good for the soul. Weekends tending to the roses she planted, the ones that kept blooming no matter how much they were ignored, no matter how harsh the conditions. One afternoon, during a walkthrough with Ethan, I told him something my grandmother once said. She told me our family was like a garden where only one type of flower was allowed to grow. I said, everything else got cut down. I looked around at the space that was finally mine, and now, I'm growing on my own terms. The financial stability helped too. Between my job, the consulting work I had built quietly over the years, and the money I was no longer spending on rent, I had saved more in a few months than I had in years. Lila, on the other hand, was learning what life looked like without constant support. The expensive apartment was gone. The lifestyle she was used to had shrunk. One afternoon, I overheard her through the vents, complaining to a coworker. "It's not fair," she said. "She got everything. Didn't she inherit it?" the coworker asked. "That's not the point." But it was exactly the point. I had inherited what was mine, and for the first time in my life, I had kept it. 6 months later, I stood in the garden at sunset, planting the last of the season's flowers. The house was quiet again. The office activity downstairs had long since ended for the day. It felt like home again. My phone rang. It was my mother. "Your sister lost her job today," she said without greeting. "I'm sorry to hear that," I replied, and I meant it. "This is because of you," she continued. "The stress. Seeing you every day, working in that house, it ruined her. Her performance was her responsibility." I said, "Family helps family." She snapped, "Family supports each other. You taught me that." I said quietly, "Just not in the way you think." She hung up. An hour later, Ethan called. The decision was based on her performance. He said, "It had nothing to do with the situation at the house. I wanted you to hear that directly." "I already knew," I said. "I heard enough through the walls." He paused. "You could have helped her?" "I could have," I admitted, but she never asked. I looked out at the garden. She demanded. She manipulated. She threatened. But she never once just asked. That night, while going through one of the closets, I found something I had never noticed before: a box. Inside were letters, dozens of them, all addressed to me. I opened one. "My dearest Maribel." It began, "I see how they dim your light, and it breaks my heart. But I also see the strength in you. It's still there, waiting. One day, you'll have the chance to step into it fully. When that moment comes, don't hesitate. Don't feel guilty. Take what is yours and build the life you deserve." I looked at the date. 3 years ago, she had known. She had planned for this long before I ever understood what was coming. The house grew quieter after that. Ethan moved the team into a proper office space a few months later. The house had served its purpose, but my lease remained. 10 years. Security. A future I could finally shape without interference. One morning, I received a message from Lila. "You won. Are you happy?" I stared at it for a moment before replying. "I'm free." That's different. Spring arrived not long after. The garden came alive again. Every plant my grandmother had cared for returned stronger, brighter. Neighbors stopped by often, sharing stories about her I had never heard before, treating me like I belonged. Because I did. One afternoon, Mrs. Alvarez mentioned something casually over tea. "Your parents are selling their house," she said, "moving out of state, starting over somewhere new, running away." That's what they always did when things didn't go their way. But I wasn't running anymore. I had put down roots. Here, in this house, in this life. Not out of revenge, but out of something stronger. Self-respect. The kind my grandmother tried to teach me, the kind they tried to take away, the kind that grew anyway. One of her letters said it best. Family isn't about who you're born to. It's about who stands by you, even when it costs them something. By that definition, I hadn't lost anything. I had gained everything. I learned that protecting what is rightfully mine doesn't make me selfish. It makes me responsible for my own life. There's a difference between love and control, between supporting family and being used by them. I chose stability, self-respect, and a future I could stand on. Even when it meant standing alone. If you were in my place, would you have done the same? Or would you have given in just to keep the peace? I'm really curious. Did you stay with me until the end? Thank you for listening. If this story made you pause, think, or see something differently, then you're already helping more people than you realize. One simple action from you, like subscribing, liking, or sharing, can bring this story to someone who needs the courage to choose themselves.